Hello everyone, this is Wicked West Books. I am Meg West, and this is my brand new location. I did film a setup of these lovely bookshelves behind me. That will be the next video that you get to watch, but today I really need to do my wrap up for August and September, and there are a lot of books to go through, so let's get started. To start off with, in August was the Booktubeathon, and I managed to read 5 books during that. The first of which was Laurel K. Hamilton's Anita Blake's Guilty Pleasures Volume 2 from the graphic novel series. It did finish out the written novel, which made me very happy. I do prefer the written novels to these graphic novels, but being able to see a lot of the characters, they were simply gorgeous. After that, and still part of the Booktubeathon, I read Iron Kissed by Patricia Briggs. It is one of my favorite books, and probably my favorite book from the Mercy Thompson novels. I absolutely love this book, and I will never get tired of reading it. The third book that I read for the Booktubeathon has turned out to be my favorite read of the year, so far anyway. That is The Arithmetist by Brandon Sanderson. I love Brandon Sanderson. Earlier this year, we read the Mistborn trilogy with Booksplosion, and I loved it. I loved The Alloy of Law even more, and I absolutely loved The Arithmetist. I am ready for Brandon Sanderson to write more in this series. After The Arithmetist, I picked up Jacoby by William Ritter. It is kind of a Sherlock Holmes cross, but instead of inspecting regular crimes, he kind of inspects magical happenings, ghosts, fae, things like that. And his sidekick is a woman who is more traditionally Sherlock Holmes than the main character Jacoby is. She realizes things about people that isn't normally noticed, and he sees the magical side of things. I thought it was a good book. I might continue to read the series, but I was not blown away with it. I felt that William Ritter could have done a lot more with this book, but as a preteen, kind of young adult level book, it was not a bad one. The final book that I read for the Booktubeathon was The Last Guardian by Owen Colfer. I absolutely love Owen Colfer's work. Artemis Fowl series is one of my favorites of all time, and it is one that if you have not read, you probably should. It is a young adult, kind of urban fantasy, but it starts off with Artemis Fowl, who is a 12-year-old criminal mastermind bent on stealing gold from the fairies who live in the center of the earth. And it is a fantastic series, and this is the conclusion to that series, the final book, which made me very, very sad because I just did not want this series to end, and I really hope that Owen Colfer will write more. After reading The Last Guardian, I picked up Mortal Heart by Robin Lefevers. This is actually book 3 in the series, and it is the first one I read. I realized when I was about halfway through it that it was not the first book in the series, and I was missing out on a whole lot. However, I did not want to stop reading it to pick up the first 2, so I finished it. I think I might have liked it a little bit better had I actually read the books in order, but as it was, I really liked this book, and it turned out to be my favorite one of the trilogy. I didn't think it would be, but it was. After the serious reading that got done during the Booktubeathon, I wanted to read something that would be completely mindless, that I wouldn't have to think about at all. I did not want to stop reading, but I didn't want to have to think too hard about it. So I found the perfect solution. The Selection by Kira Cass. Now, I picked this up because I wanted something mindless, and I can essentially sum up this book in just 2 words. The Bachelor. That's really all this is. There is a prince, he needs a bride, so they put on a televised contest for these future potential princesses to win his heart. This is the first book of a trilogy. By the end of this book, there are, I believe, 6 girls for him to choose from, and at the end of the second one, he chooses the one, but it takes a little while for them to actually get to the altar. I loved this book. I did not expect to. I really did not. But I did. I loved this book and immediately went to check out the rest of them because it was so great. However, there were some waiting lines for me to get to the rest of the book, which is why the next book I actually got to read was Grave Mercy by Robin Lefevers. I did find these books to be fairly mindless, so I was able to continue reading them. They did involve some thought process, as there was subplots and scheming going on in the background, but it wasn't too bad. And as I said before, I liked the series, but it's not my favorite. And while reading that, the next book for the selection came up for me to read, The Elite by Kira Cass. And again, I did not expect to like this book. I started off, I wasn't too impressed with the opening, but once you get into it, it's really fantastic, and I really think it helps that the main character agrees with us on how stupid a way this is for him to find a bride. And after I finished The Elite, I read the second book to Grave Mercy, the second book in the His Fair Assassins trilogy, and that completed the trilogy for me. Knowing about this story, what I did from the third one, I expected it to be my favorite. Ugly man, beautiful woman. I was really hoping for it to be kind of a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but it was nothing like that. Despite the fact that the main guy character was ugly and preferred being called Beast, he did not need the love of a woman to transform him to a person who was gentle at all. And that really kind of just disappointed me on the whole story. And that was all for the month of August. On to the month of September. I started it off reading The One by Kira Cass, which is the finale of that trilogy, and it was also a superb book, and I absolutely loved it. I am waiting to read The Heir as soon as it's available to check out from my library, which could be just a little while, but I'm looking forward to reading it. However, the trilogy is a good stopping point, so I'm just going to wait until it becomes available, and I'm not going to try to find it somewhere else for me to borrow it. After that, I read Attachments by Rainbow Rowell. This book took place at the turn of the century. There is a guy who, his job is basically to read people's emails and tell his higher-ups these people are not using their email for non-work purposes, they should get in trouble for it. Instead, however, he ends up falling in love with one of the girls who is emailing someone else, and it creates a few issues in their life when they actually finally meet. It was adorable, not my favorite type of book. Contemporary is not my favorite, but I did really enjoy this book, and it is only my second Rainbow Rowell book that I have ever read. I will continue to read her. After that, I picked up Panic by Lauren Oliver. I didn't really like this book. I didn't hate it, so I finished it, but I had a lot of issues with this book. One of the biggest ones is she used it as a plot line so that she could move the story along to where it needed to go, but I really wish she would have picked a different place than Walmart. Walmart does not fire you for being 20 minutes late. And then there were just several other issues with the police not being able to follow the clues, and it had a lot of issues for me, and I didn't relate to the main character too well at all, and altogether I was very disappointed with Panic by Lauren Oliver. After that, I picked up a series which I'm going to talk about all at once because I read the books one after the other after the other. The first was The Girl in the Steel Quartet, then there was The Girl in the Clockwork Collar, two short stories of The Dark Discovery of Jack Dandy and The Wild Adventure of Jasper Wren, and the final book in the series was The Girl with the Iron Touch by Katie Cross. This series was fairly mindless. I don't want to say that it wasn't good, because it was fairly decent. It's just, it involved no thought process to really go through it. The characters went on a perceivable route. There was no real mystery. I had things figured out halfway through the book, even though you necessarily weren't supposed to. So the whole series got about an average of 3 stars out for me. It is kind of an interesting twist on some of the older classics. They have a Frankenstein, there is a Jekyll and Hyde, which is actually the main character. The girl in the steel corset has that kind of Jekyll and Hyde mentality to begin with, and in this world, the actual story of Jekyll and Hyde was based off of her father, and it has some interesting things to it, just not my favorite series. However, the books themselves, if you see the covers, they're absolutely gorgeous. And then after that, I decided that I wanted to continue on with my reading books with women in beautiful dresses on the cover, which seemed to have been the pattern I had been following for a little bit. So I looked at my shelves, and there's a series on it that I have not finished. I have read everything but the last book, and it was time that I finished it. So I picked it up. I started off with Deadly Love by B.D. Joyce, which is just how she penned her name for the first one. And then I read Deadly Pleasure by Brenda Joyce, Deadly Affairs by Brenda Joyce, Deadly Desire by Brenda Joyce, Deadly Caress by Brenda Joyce, and finally, Deadly Promise by Brenda Joyce, which is the only other book in the series that I don't own. These books take place in 1902, New York City. They are a historical romance murder mystery type series. She works very closely with the police commissioner of New York, who is Rick Bragg, and her first love interest. He was never my favorite one. My favorite is the one that she gets with after she finds out some rather unsettling things about Rick Bragg, the police commissioner, his half-brother Calder Hart. He has always been my favorite for this series, and in the rereading, he got off to a little bit of a rough start, but I still like him a lot more than Rick Bragg. Although there are some things about Francesca Cahill I don't really like. She doesn't have a lot of smarts. She goes to college, and it's unusual for someone in that time, especially a woman, to go on to college, but she makes a list during book 2 of things that she needs to buy for professional sleuthing. She buys the actual gun on the list during book 3, and she feels safe with this thing that the gun seller calls a bauble. She feels so much safer with it in her hand while she's going about, and then her fiance opens the gun and is like, oh, phew, you don't even have any bullets in it. She forgot to buy bullets for the gun and still felt safer with it in her hand. And the rest of the characters are fantastic, and I'm looking forward to finally finishing the series. That's all I have for you guys today. That's just over 20 minutes of raw footage, so I'm gonna see just how well I can cut that down. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you in my next video, which is the book shelf rearrangement video that I filmed, and hopefully I'll get back on a regular schedule. I'll see you guys next time. Have a wicked day. Formerly